What's going on, everybody? Today we're breaking down all things on the 2025 Indianapolis Colts, including if Johnathan Taylor could be this year's Saquon Barkley. All I mean by that is a second-round undervalued running back in fantasy football land. Also thoughts on if Tyler Warren can boom after being selected 14th overall. Who is the wide receiver to pick inside this muddled room, and why is it Josh Downs? And I guess we'll also break down one of the saddest quarterback battles in recent NFL memory. All that and much more here on today's Fantasy Life show. Joining me to accomplish all of these tasks, we do have the one, the only Fantasy Life Director of Analytics, Dwain "The Rock" McFarland. And Dwain, let's accordingly get after it with our Fantasy Crystal Ball presented by DraftKings. Mentioned in the intro, Dwain, but I am wondering if Johnathan Taylor could be this year's Saquon Barkley. And what I specifically mean by that is we're looking at a guy going in round 2 of early fantasy drafts who we believe to be a very good real-life NFL running back. Some might even say great, but unfortunately couldn't get things going last year and a not-so-great offense. And he also had to deal with some early season injuries that perhaps distracted us from his true greatness when things are going right. So, Dwain, the answer.
The answer. All right. The crystal ball unveiling it. No. I don't think he's going to be Saquon Barkley, but I do think, like you bring up a good point. Like I do think he could be a value where he's going, in round 2. I mean, we're talking about a player that we know is going to get a massive workload on the ground, but not be very involved in the passing game. Those two things do match Saquon Barkley. He's going to be 26.7 when the year starts. So he's still technically in his prime. He's also a player that historically has shown to have this high efficiency upside as far as rushing. Ian, in his first 2 seasons, 5 and 5.5 yards per carry. Last year, 4.7, so not too bad. And the explosive rush rate, so which is what Saquon really helped him last year. First 2 years of his career, 15% for JT. It's come down a little bit, 11, but then back up to 14% and then 10% last year. But if he could be in that 13 to 15% range, like, the underlying elements are there that match up really well with Saquon. So I think it's a good comp on your part. I think the thing that keeps me from getting there is Saquon Barkley played on the Eagles and Johnathan Taylor plays on the Colts, who are projected for far less wins. We do like their offensive line, though. Now, we've got some questions. Ryan Kelly moves on. Will Fry is also the right guard. He moves on. So we don't know necessarily how good those replacements will be. So there's a little bit of a question with the offensive line, but it was the 4th best run blocking unit last season. So that's another thing that's similar to the Eagles. So I think there are definitely these parallels, but the biggest thing is when I look at the way I've got this offense projected, and maybe you just slap me in the face, you say, what? You know what? You're an idiot, Dwain. You're wrong on this. We're going to need more touchdowns. I've got them projected for the 6th fewest touchdowns in the league at 27. Now, I have more of them coming on the ground than through the air, which is kind of rare. Some of that comes down to some of these with Daniel Jones as well as Anthony Richardson helping score a few rushing touchdowns as well. And I've got them projected for the 7th fewest yards in the league. So the offense is just not quite there for me. I do think the underlying talent components for JT actually is a pretty good comp to Saquon. I think also at a very similar age. So I think there are a lot of things here that we could like and point to and say, man, these are things we like about JT. We would just need this offense to make a really big step forward to unlock that top 3 ceiling, I think, for Mr. Taylor, because we're not going to get a ton of work in the pass game.
To be fair, Shane Steichen's done, I think, a better job than people probably think he has over these past 2 seasons. Obviously, Anthony Richardson has been in and out of the lineup, and when he's been in there, hasn't been an overly good real-life quarterback, and that's probably putting it, overly generously. But man, 10th in points scored back in 2023 with Gardner Minshew leading the charge. Even last year, man, if you had just asked me where the Colts scoring offense was last year before I looked it up just now, I probably would have said something in the 20s. No, they were 17th. They've been top 15 in yards both times as well. So defense hasn't exactly been, holding the oppositions down low. So I think, that kind of back and forth shootout sort of game script has helped matters. But again, wouldn't completely put it past this group, as you mentioned, the good offensive line from helping JT keep on keeping on. Because let's face it, man, last year was pretty great. I know a lot of people just remember the very, very unfortunate event that probably screwed over some of the listeners' fantasy season when JT was about to score a long touchdown against the Broncos, dropped the ball before the goal line. That sucked. I hear you guys, but man, 1,400 yards and 11 touchdowns in just 14 games. That's over 100 rushing yards per game, guys. Johnathan Taylor is the NFL's 5th all-time leading rusher in terms of rushing yards per game. We just unfortunately haven't seen him healthy in quite some time. The last time he was fully healthy from start to finish, he finished as the RB1 overall in fantasy back in 2021. What happened in 2022? We had a grade 2 ankle sprain in week 4, season-ending high ankle sprain in week 15. 2023, for those of you listening, thank you, first of all, but I am using, hand quotes right now. Back injury that kept him on IR for the first 4 weeks of the year, probably more of a contract, issue there. Comes back though, tears his thumb ligament in week 12. Didn't quite look like the same JT. All right, last year, what happened there? Grade 3 high ankle sprain in week 4, man. I didn't hear JT say this, but we do hear players coming back from that high ankle sprain. We got to talk to Austin Eckler actually a couple weeks ago. Very cool. Austin is the man. But he even said, when you come back from these high ankle sprains, man, usually you're not back to feeling like your full self until the next year. So on the one hand, I don't like going through a laundry list of injuries and saying, well, if this guy just can't get injured again, that will be fine here. So I understand that aspect of it. But man, in that round 2 range, Dwain, again, not trying to be this guy who just loves every single player equally, and you should all draft them all and just have the right exposure and all this and that. We need to make a stand at some point. I am taking Devon Achane ahead of JT, but man, I have been happy to mix this dude in when I'm not able to do that.
Yeah, I agree. I've been taking him over Bucky Irving, who I love. I've mixed those in together a couple of times, but I do think the injury stuff matters because we talk about how explosive he had been early in his career, and then the injuries that he's had aren't injuries that we would expect to nag him the rest of his career, right? These are things that a player does bother them in a season, but then they can get over it, right? And it's not going to be detrimental to the following years. He's still in his prime. And I do think the big out here is if he just really goes loco, right, when it comes down to these really big plays. And I think that's on the table for JT. So it's interesting because I have heard a few other fantasy analysts out there that actually some people I really respect, and they're really putting JT in this bucket of they think that he is an archetype you just want to avoid. And I just don't think that. I think that he's still a young enough player. He showed a huge ceiling when he was young. He wasn't catching passes then, and he was still putting up huge fantasy points. Now, again, the offense is going to be a challenge. If he was playing in a really good offense, Johnathan Taylor would be going in round 1 of drafts, guys. So it's already baked into where you're getting him. So I'm not on the same page with some of those other really smart analysts that are better than me at times at different things. I think that JT is a really good target in round 2 of fantasy drafts this season.
Last point here, which again, maybe doesn't make you feel better about drafting JT. He has actually missed more games than Christian McCaffrey over these past 3 seasons. And I more so just bring that up to be like, maybe consider things a little bit more closely when we just want to call someone injury prone or he's going to get hurt. But right now, JT is healthy. And man, in round 2, once we are making week 1 ranks, Dwain, which I know you already have live on the site, I've submitted mine. They should be up there sooner rather than later. But once we get into it, man, good luck ranking more than 6 or 7 guys ahead of JT. Please, injury gods, one time we beg you. So overall, guys, with that crystal ball, maybe not exactly predicting the RB1 overall finish for Taylor that Saquon pulled off last year. But hey, I would not be surprised in the least if we do get top 5 numbers. So again, this has been the Fantasy Life Crystal Ball presented by the fine folks at DraftKings. All right, everyone. Wimbledon is almost here, and the excitement is building with the game's biggest stars set to battle it out on the sport's most iconic stage. Every serve, volley, and rally could make history. Get in on the action with my partners at DraftKings Sportsbook, and right now, new customers who bet just $5 can get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Whether you're backing a top seed or hoping for a Cinderella story, now is the perfect time to make your pick. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and sign up using my promo code FANTASYLIFE. The crown is yours. All right, Dwain, we have a fairly crowded wide receiver room with a lot of guys who I think you could argue are good to great. I've called them kind of the AFC's version of the Packers in that regard. So we do have Josh Downs, who's been just really the fancy, the absolute darling of the fantasy community's eye over the last couple of weeks, it seems. Michael Pittman, though, only a year removed where he played through a broken back. People freaking forget about that. From being a consistent wide receiver 2 in fantasy land. Oh, yeah, who actually led the Colts in receiving yards last year? It was Alec Pierce. And then meanwhile, A.D. Mitchell had the best horrible rookie season in NFL history, getting open at will, but either dropping the ball or not getting an accurate target in the first place. So, of course, Dwain, the elephant in the room is that Daniel Jones and or Anthony Richardson will be throwing the balls to these group of pass catchers. Also expecting this to be more of a run-first offense. And, oh, yeah, they just use a top 15 overall pick on Tyler Warren, a pass-catching tight end. So out of all these wide receivers who, accordingly, are priced as wide receiver 4s or cheaper, who have you been prioritizing in early drafts?
Yeah, I mean, look, you know me, I lean really to the talent. Like, I have to look at all of it because in projections, we have to put all these things together. But Josh Downs is already a borderline wide receiver 1 talent, and your league mates just don't know it. Points per game, yes, 9.2 fantasy points, went to 13.2 last year, which was a wide receiver 3. But in his 7 games where he had an actual competent passer under center, and competent means Joe Flacco, guys, 15.5 fantasy points per game. So that would have been a wide receiver 2 finish. Look at his targets, 26%. That's wide receiver 1 worthy going back to 2011 and looking at wide receiver 1s in fantasy. Yards per route run, 2.20, also wide receiver 1 worthy. So when he had a competent passer, he was a borderline wide receiver 1, and his underlying data points actually already match up with a wide receiver 1. So I love Josh Downs, but the challenge is there are a lot of ways that it could go wrong. Ian, and you already you named some of those, but just real quickly, Anthony Richardson's number 1. I know we're thinking Daniel Jones is going to start the year, but we're also hearing right now that Anthony Richardson is going to be ready for training camp. So, we could be changing our minds on this really quick, and there's a chance we're going to see Anthony Richardson at some point in the season. Like, I still feel like the Colts need to know what they have in Richardson and give him one more shot. 10.7 fantasy points per game last year for Josh Downs in the games with Anthony Richardson under center. Those were just the full games with Richardson. The other challenge here is the Colts so far have only viewed Mr. Downs as a player they want to get on the field when they're running 11 personnel. So that's limited him to 75% route participation over the last 2 years. We want guys that are in the 85 to 95% range to really give us the ceiling we're looking for in fantasy football. So he would need to take over more work in the 2 wide receiver sets. With Shane Steichen, he likes to run a lot of 2 tight end stuff. He wants to give some heavy looks. So I don't think those things necessarily just go away. So I think he's got to earn some additional looks on the outside. And then you mentioned the other thing, I won't spend too long here, but the target competition. Michael Pittman, and just quickly on him, like, people forget like how good Michael Pittman is just as a target earner, guys. 24, and 28% target shares before falling to 22% last year. And oh, by the way, dude, like you said, playing with a bad bat, getting a 22%. You already mentioned the arrival of Tyler Warren. And then the final part is, okay, great, we don't get Anthony Richardson, but we get Daniel Jones. Like, I think Daniel Jones is going to be a more capable passer as far as Anthony versus Anthony Richardson. We have to say that at this point, but it's not like we think Daniel Jones is a superstar as a passer. So love the talent for Josh Downs, a player that I'm drafting a lot in best ball. But man, there are a lot of things that could happen here that could really hurt him. And if Tyler Warren is a superstar, that's another added person to the offense that's going to hurt as well. So again, love the player. Lots of questions, though, as to what could derail his season.
You would think that Jones is going to be better for Warren, Pittman, and Downs because just historically he's been one of the lower average target depth quarterbacks in the league. Not always, but Richardson really is up there with Jameis Winston year after year in terms of the biggest, most fearless gunslingers in the NFL, for better and, let's face it, mostly worse. So with Downs, I will say I wonder if some of those splits for Richardson could just be due to the fact that he was banged up last year. I mean, we had a grade 3 high ankle sprain in August, and we had an early season toe injury, and then a shoulder that he just kept playing through. I mean, this is a tough wide receiver room. You mentioned Michael Pittman's target shares, and guess what? Those were going hand in hand with a lot of fantasy points. Last 3 years before last season, which wasn't great, wide receiver 45. He finished, though, wide receiver 24, 22, and 14 in PPR points per game. So for me, man, I really have focused most of my, just drafting Colts wide receivers on those 2 guys. Obviously, Pierce and Mitchell are going to be cheaper options, but just feel like, again, they're going to kind of eat more into each other's workloads. And as things stand right now, I do favor Jones to start more games than Richardson this year. So I would focus things around Downs and Pittman. Feels like both guys are being priced far closer to their floors than ceilings, Dwain. I mean, Pittman is a wide receiver 50 right now over Underdog Fantasy. Downs is wide receiver 46. I'll say this. Both of them are two of my top 6 guys. You mentioned our New York Giants preview. Check that out if you guys haven't already. But you kind of let the board determine who you're going to take between Cam Scatterbo and Tyron Tracy during any given draft. That's kind of how I've been here. I think they're both really good. I can see the upside for both, and I can see both of them just, maybe not completely balling out, but at wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 price tags, that's a bet I'm willing to make.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I think Downs carries slightly more upside when we just look at all the underlyings versus Pittman. But again, both guys priced pretty closely together. Do like them both. I think the big question here is, does Tyler Warren come in and really turn this into more of a 3-headed monster in a mediocre to bad passing game? Or does he kind of have the rookie season blues that we do see from time to time for, well, actually, besides Sam Laporta and Brock Bowers, we most often do see these guys not really put up these huge seasons. So I think that Tyler Warren is actually a pretty big factor in how these other two players are going to look when it comes to the end of the year.
And with that, let's get into the 14th overall pick out of Penn State. I mean, if you guys watched Tyler Warren film at any point this offseason, you have surely had a fun time. The dude just had over 1,200 receiving yards. He led college football in yards per carry and was an absolute beast as a Wildcat quarterback. Like, again, guys, big-time Ohio State truther here. Lifer, I freaking love the Buckeyes. The fact that Tyler Warren didn't get to touch the ball on 4 straight plays on the 1-yard line against that Ohio State defense, I could not have been prouder to, see Penn State have that just absolute disastrous play calling. So good luck, guys. I'm sure James Franklin will figure it out here in the coming years. All of that aside, though, again, Warren was just quite put simply one of the single best players in college football last year. Now, that was his 5th year, I believe, Dwain. And yes, there were NFLers before him, but man, Theo Johnson, Brent Strange. It's not like we had George Kittle or someone like that was keeping this dude on the bench. So with Warren, I know there's a lot of debate in the pre-draft circles between him and Colston Loveland. Not saying both guys can't be great, but just in terms of his prospect profile, Dwain, do you think there is maybe a bit more risk here than people are giving him credit for?
Yeah, I think there is a little more risk. Like the supermodel definitely liked Colston Loveland ahead of Tyler Warren, even when we thought Ty Warren was going to go ahead of Colston Loveland in the draft, but they were still similarly, they were pretty close. I just think that Colston Loveland has shown an ability to do more things, right, that translate to the NFL. If we look at Tyler Warren, most of his success came to stuff underneath, and a lot of it was design. Now, if you guys go watch the film on Tyler Warren, you're going to have a blast, because once you get the ball in this dude's hands, he turns into a running back. Like, he is running over people, stiff arming people, and he has a nose for getting that first down. So I'm not trying to take anything away from Tyler Warren. Like, he is really good after the catch. The bottom line is the Colts took him at pick 14, so they believe in him. I think they're going to have some sort of a plan. If you look at Shane Steichen, I'm actually with you. Earlier you mentioned like Shane Steichen's actually overcome some of this bad quarterback play to at least put up like mediocre offenses. I think he knows how to push a lot of these different kind of buttons. His big thing is really the RPO stuff. And if you think about the way the RPO stuff can work, it can work with Daniel Jones or it can work with Anthony Richardson. And if you're looking at that player that you're trying to get the ball to in short area space, it used to be Michael Pittman. Man, I could see a lot of those targets now going to Warren instead, just really designing it to get it to the tight end, because he's just going to be a better yards after the catch player than Michael Pittman. So I think there's a sneaky fit there, but obviously we need more than that, right? We need more than, okay, great, when they run an RPO, they're going to get the ball, to Tyler Warren. So if you look at his historical comps in the supermodel, he came out in an 81, 84 in the draft capital rating. Remember, guys, everything in the supermodel is a grid between 50 and 100. He had a 72 production score, mostly because of what Ian said. Didn't break out until year 5. And while he did play with other pros that got drafted, Brenton Strange, Theo Johnson, Pat Freiermuth, it's not like any one of those were really elite players, in college, or have turned into elite players in the NFL. So would hope to see him kind of, work into a larger role, even though he had some of those good players playing with him sooner in his career. But man, the film folks love Tyler Warren. His film rating came in at a 90. We're mostly relying on Lance Zierlein stuff. There's a little bit of PFF stuff going into it. So if you look at his comps over the first 3 years of their career, 20% of them went on to be top 3 tight ends. So we're talking about the ones we really care about. 70% went on to be top 12. The rest were high-end tight end twos. So you got a range of outcomes there. The way I look at him, Ian, see if your thoughts are similar. Basically, once you get to the draft where I'm looking at names, I'm not saying these guys are bad and can't just give you fill-in points at tight end if you wait. But once you get to the names Hunter Henry, you get to the names Zach Ertz, you get to some of these guys that we know they've been around, they're veterans, it's fine, we can put them in our lineup. I'm taking Tyler Warren ahead of him. I'm taking Colson Loveland ahead of those guys. And it could be a bust, right? We might by week 3 just have to cut Tyler Warren. But the point is, if you get it right, he can give you something that those can't. He could actually give you a ceiling that if they decide, man, we're going to give this guy a 25% target share, and that'll be tough with the other targets in the offense. But the way they design things, and if they just want to get the ball into his hands and let him do this yak stuff in, and he gets a little bit of work on the ground, like we could have a guy that could be like the tight end 8 or tight end 7. Like that's just going to be a tougher outcome for Hunter Henry and Zach Ertz and some of these other guys. So just a little bit more ceiling. If you look at him in the ceiling floor model over at Fantasy Life, obviously the floor is not great, 6.8. But guys, we're talking about tight ends. A lot of tight ends are around that range. His median projection right now at Fantasy Life is 8.7 points per game in a PPR league, but his ceiling is 12.8, which would put him in that mid-range tight end 1 kind of area. So when I look at it, I essentially get to a spot where I'm like, man, just give me the upside. If it doesn't work out, I'll cut it and I think I can find someone. Maybe I don't draft Hunter Henry or Zach Ertz, but I feel a lot more. I think, Ian, we can find someone off the waiver wire that can replace their production. If Tyler Warren goes off, we might not have something like that on the waiver wire.
I mean, I'll take him over those old geezers 8 days of the week, man. The problem is I'm pretty sure Warren's going to be sporting, a top 10, top 12 ADP. It's going to be versus guys like Evan Ingram and David Njoku and Colson Loveland himself. So I will say at that price, I have not been buying into him much. But, man, Dwain, I'm sure we'll do this again in July, August, hopefully as soon as possible so we can get to fixing these mistakes. But every year we do our, what guys have we not been drafting that scare us? And Tyler Warren is one of those for me because I'm terrified of looking up after the end of week 1 and going, oh yeah, the Colts just fed 13 targets to the dude they picked 14th overall. I understand last year the Colts had the 4th fewest targets to tight ends, but I was shocked, man, to see they actually had the 14th most in terms of the 2023. Some of that I'm sure was Gardner Minshew under center, but I would say Daniel Jones is for sure more Minshew versus Flacco or Richardson, gunslinger central. And even that 2023 team, man, Kylan Granson was their tight end 1. So if they're willing to give that dude 50 targets, who's to say it couldn't be 2 or 3 times that many for Tyler Warren? So again, I'm with you. I hope that in some of these, ESPN, Yahoo leagues, we do have Warren.
He's
closer.
Way lower. I was just going to tell you're not going to have to deal with what you're on underdog. To your point, he's the tight end 9. But again, the guys you talked about, Kelsey, Mark Andrews, Evan Ingram, they're all going ahead of him. Jonnu is going just after him, and Jonnu's about to crater, and he goes ahead of David Njoku, but they're essentially the same spot, 123 and 125. Then you get to Tucker Kraft, who I think is a very similar player to Tyler Warren, right? They're kind of the same thing, this really good run after the catch player. So I'm fine with that. And then right after that, you've got Dalton Kincaid. So I think he's still in the right range. But once you look at ESPN, man, and I resort by that using the ADP tool over at fantasylife.com, we've now got Tyler Warren down here at tight end 12. He's going right by Tucker Kraft, ahead of Dalton Kincaid, ahead of Pat Freiermuth, ahead of Isaiah Likely. Like, I can stomach all those. Just real quick, we'll look at Yahoo and where he's going at over there. We'll see what Mr. Matt Harmon has to say about it. Tyler Warren over there is going tight end 13. So again, I think you're getting him right at the end of the tight end 1 range to high end tight end 2 range, which honestly I think that's about the right price. And I think there's a trio of players that we like there, and it doesn't have to be Tyler Warren. It can be Tyler Warren, it can be Colson Loveland, or it can be Tucker Kraft. I kind of look at those 3 guys, all very similar. You could argue Isaiah Likely, but we got to deal with Mark Andrews still being in the picture. But like he's a similar talent profile to these guys. But I think those 3, man, you put them together, once you get past some of the other names that you talked about, I like throwing darts at those guys. I think they all have upside.
Love that price. And it's a good reminder and something that we will be providing for you guys during this summer to really be aware again of your fantasy provider and the differences in ADP across those sites. So was actually pre-playing some shows earlier today, guys. Yahoo, ESPN, Sleeper, Superflex, all these different formats, different rules and all that. Fully planning on devoting full shows to you guys and getting you ready for those drafts. So final point I will leave you guys with, I mean, when you do look at rookie tight ends, I know Brock Bowers and Sam Laporta, 2 years in a row, have absolutely crushed. Those are 2 of only 4 instances over the past decade of a tight end actually posting top 12 numbers as a rookie. So again, hey, how many tight ends are picked as high Warren to begin with. Not that many. I will give him a better chance than most of your typical rookie tight ends, but still is one of these positions, man, where not only do you have to go ahead and get to the NFL level, emerge as someone capable of demanding targets, but a lot of offenses, you got to be good enough to stay on the field as a blocker too. Something that, again, is just hard for any rookie, let alone, someone like Warren, who maybe didn't have, the sort of blocking credentials that you would be led to believe. Could be even tougher for him to get going there. So we've talked now, Dwayne, about the wide receivers and running backs and tight ends. So let's now talk about the most important position on the football field, and that is this aforementioned pretty ugly quarterback battle. So again, Daniel Jones looking like the front runner just because Anthony Richardson, unfortunately, dealing with another, right shoulder problem that, again, if you want to listen to what the doctors are saying, does really sound like could continue to be an issue as long as he declines against surgery. So Daniel Jones, front runner, Dwayne, rate his chances of being the next great reclamation project in the vein of Geno Smith or Baker Mayfield from 1 to 10. I know you love these games.
Yeah, I'm going to put him at a 6. He can't spin it the way Geno can't spin it the way Baker can. We could throw Sam Darnold in this conversation too. Yeah. Can't spin it like him. Those guys can spin it to all levels of the field. They can make the big time throws. They can thread the needle. That's not really what we have with Daniel Jones. He can flash from time to time in the passing game, but really what you're going to be relying on here from a fantasy perspective, let's talk Daniel Jones first and then his impact on the offense. But from a fantasy perspective, what you love is what he can do on the ground. And only 208 yards per game over his career as a passer. But when we look at him as a rusher, 31.2 rushing yards per game, man, that's really good. And it's not just due to one big spike season carrying everything along. And then you think about the marriage here again with the Shane Steichen offense. I actually do think it's perfect. Think of all the RPOs we're going to running where he can either have the chance to hand the ball off to Johnathan Taylor, he can pull it and keep it, or he can dump it in the short area of space to a guy like Tyler Warren and let him do the run after the catch stuff. So I think there's a really good marriage with what Daniel Jones does well and the way the offense probably gets ran. We look at points per game with Daniel Jones. We have also seen the spikes historically. So if we look at him going back to his rookie year, he gave us 18.9 fantasy points per game, like right out of the gate. People got kind of excited. Then it fell off 14.3, 15.6. Then what happens? He has a year where he rushes for 7 rushing touchdowns, gets up to 18.5 fantasy points per game. Last 2 years, 10.8 and 14.6. So he's already shown us that he can give us this spike kind of season. Whenever I plugged his numbers into the ceiling floor model over at Fantasy Life, 13.5 was the floor, kind of in line with those numbers that we just saw. Tells me the Fantasy Life projection models doing, or ceiling floor models doing a pretty good job here. 16.6 was the median, but the ceiling's actually a little higher than what we've seen so far, 21.9. And that was with me projecting him for under the 208 yards per game. I only have him at 205. That's less than what he's averaged for his career. I think you could argue that I'm being a tad stingy because has Daniel Jones had a better supporting cast than this? I think this is his best supporting cast ever. I think it's way better than anything he ever had at the Giants.
I don't think it's particularly close,
Yeah, I don't either. Cool. So, yeah.
Think about
I maybe need to bump that up is my point.
Think about the efforts that teams and organizations have made to get their young quarterbacks a stud wide receiver. And I get it. We finally got Malik Neighbors there in 2024. That was awesome. Who was it before? Kenny Galladay's corpse, all right? Like, he was fun in Detroit, I get it, but that was mocked ruthlessly, and it's like we never give Daniel Jones any credit for it. Sterling Shepard was this dude's best wide receiver more years than not. Dude could not stay healthy. Again, even Brian Daboll's. Look, Brian Daboll's whole claim to fame, the reason why he keeps getting these chances again, I know he did great stuff in Buffalo, but it just was that one 2022 season with Daniel Jones, Dwayne, where we saw top 8 fantasy production. We saw 379 total yards and a pair of touchdowns in an upset playoff win in Minnesota. Like, that is not easy to do, man. He deserves credit there. So it's one of these things where I think similar to the conversation we had with Sam Darnold last year, a lot of bad. I fully get it. But man, when you do actually see stuff being put together decently and you had 1 year of really freaking good, it's something that, again, at a complete dirt cheap free fantasy cost, I'm willing to throw a dart at. And that really is the reason why I have been preferring Jones over even someone like Richardson, because again, we just haven't seen the ability to stay healthy. And even before that whole thing happened, Dwayne, I mean, even before the Richardson re-aggravation, I still favor Jones to be starting far more games games this season. You just don't go out in free agency and give this dude, what was it, $17.7 million, talking about creating real competition. And again, with jobs seemingly on the line now, I do think Jones will be that guy. So again, heights, otherwise not great, but even outside of rushing, Dwain, 12th out of 37 quarterbacks in EPA per dropback for Daniel Jones back in 2022. That is pretty good out there, and he deserves at least some credit for that. So has he been someone, 3 quarterback builds you're actually tacking on there in the last couple rounds?
Well, there was a period where, especially if you were doing the super flex stuff over on Underdog, he was the best pick on the board, but then he really quickly shot up with the injury news, and it caught up pretty quickly. But here's what I'll say. So if I were to go in right now, the ceiling projection in the Fantasy Life model gives Daniel Jones 224 passing yards per game, which is well above his career average of 208. But if we just said based off of the better weapons that we have here, and I gave him a projection of 225 passing yards as his median, and then I just slightly bumped up his passing touchdowns from 1.1 per game to 1.25. His ceiling would jump to 23.9 fantasy points per game, right? He has the right ingredient. Now, again, he's never really done it as a passer, but if we do think these are the best weapons ever, and those weapons could be worth maybe a 20-yard per game improvement for him, which I don't think is completely unreasonable, there is a chance that Daniel Jones gives us this kind of ceiling spike season that we just are not anticipating. He's already done it twice before, guys, but it was mostly based on the rushing stuff. So if he was able to do the rushing, if he had a rushing spike season again and just got this modest improvement as a passer, it's reasonable. It could happen. Are we going to go out there and be drafting it all the time? No. You know what's funny, though? In a vacuum, assuming he plays the whole year, he has a higher ceiling in fantasy points per game than Jared Goff. He has a higher fantasy ceiling in points per game than Tua Tagovailoa. It's higher than Matthew Stafford. Yes, it comes with additional risk because if the Colts stink and it's week 8 and Anthony Richardson's shoulder is fine, we could see them go to Anthony Richardson just because they're well, we might as well just go ahead and run him out there and just make for sure because next year we're going to have to draft a quarterback again. So there are other factors that go into play, but there's definitely some ceiling here with Daniel Jones thanks to he's just got a unique profile with the way things blend out.
After saying a lot of nice things about Daniel Jones, I think I am going to throw some cold water on that as we get into the win total, Dwain. Sitting at 7.5, I will be taking under. Good for them for clearing this in 4 of the last 5 years. But I just feel like these partial rebuilds seldom go the way that people are hoping, okay? And as much as Shane Steichen has done a good job with the hand he's been dealt, I just don't think that hand is necessarily in such a better spot this year than it was, over these past 2 seasons. So give me under 7.5. I just think the answer at the end of the day in real life, especially to Daniel Jones versus Anthony Richardson, might as well be no. So under 7.5 for me. What say you?
Man, I had under written down, and I'm just going to go with the over. Just give me 8 wins instead of the 7.5. Well, they've had 8, 9, and 4. They did have the 4 was terrible last year, but again, like you said, Shane Steichen, I do think overall is a plus coach. Mm-hmm. And if he can work with a quarterback that can just be functional. So this is essentially me making a bet on Daniel Jones, being their bridge quarterback and starting all year, and then being just competitive enough to win 8 or 9 games. I know some Colt fans are going to hate that because you're probably thinking, man, let's just tank and get another really high pick and take another swing at a big quarterback. And I wouldn't blame you. If I'm a Colts fan, that may actually be what I want, even though, you kind of have to suffer through this season, which is never fun if that happens. But I do think that with the coaching staff that we have, plus how well Daniel Jones meshes with the coaches and the weapons that we have, just I'll take the 8. Give me the over.
Dwain's doing it live, taking the over. I got the under. So Colts fans, feel free to direct all mean-spirited comments towards your boy, Ian. That's going to wrap up this edition of the Fantasy Life Show. In the meantime, like and subscribe if you're into that kind of thing. Otherwise, just have a great rest of your day. So for Dwain, for producer Matt, for producer Kelsey, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning in to the Fantasy Life Show. And until next time, take care, everybody.